31,629,783 votes, or a lead of more than 16,593,010 votes over his nearest rival. Vice President Maria Leonor Robredo. For the Vice Presidency, Mayor Sara Duterte received 32,208,417 votes and had a margin of over 22,879,210 votes over her closest rival, Senator Francis Nepomuceno Pangilinan. On this note, I urge the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives in this joint public session to approve the report of the Joint Committee embodying the resolution of both houses proclaiming Honorable Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr. as President and Honorable Sara Zimmerman as Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
We begin tonight with Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. officially proclaimed the next President of the Philippines. Marcos Jr. received 31 million votes from nearly 60% of the electorate, commanding a landslide victory, while his running mate presidential daughter Sara Duterte Carpio is the country's 15th Vice President with more than 32 million votes. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Ed Lingao. You're watching The Big Story. It's official. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been proclaimed as the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines. His running mate Sara Duterte Carpio has also been declared as Vice President after a two-day canvassing of votes by Congress. Let's get more details on this. Marian Enriquez is reporting to us live from the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City. Marian, how was it there? Kamusta ang proclamation?
Yes, Bok, it was a jubilant mood here at the Batasang Pambansa as Congress leaders cheered during the proclamation of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte as the next President and Vice President of the country. Earlier in the afternoon, the Senate and House contingent finished delivering the Joint Committee report on the Congress sitting as the National Board of Canvassers. Senate Majority Leader Mig Zubiri lauded the highest number of votes in election history with over 55 million votes. Along with that, Zubiri pointed out that it is clear that a majority of Filipinos have decided on their next President and Vice President. Marcos Jr. garnered 31.6 million votes or 58.77% of the total votes cast, a 16 million lead over second placer Vice President Leni Robredo. Meanwhile, Inday Sara received 32.2 million votes or 61.53% of the total votes cast, with a lead of 22 million over her closest opponent, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. During the proclamation itself, Marcos Jr. was accompanied by his wife, Attorney Liza Araneta Marcos, son Simon, and mother former First Lady Imelda Marcos. His sisters, Senator Amy Marcos and Irene, were also in attendance. Duterte Carpio, meanwhile, was accompanied by former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo and Davao Occidental Governor Claude Bautista. Following their proclamation, Marcos Jr. had this to say for their upcoming term.
I ask you all, pray for me, wish me well. I want to do well, because when a president does well, the country does well. And I want to do well for this country.
Magtulungan tayo para sa isang bayan na mapayapa at nagkakaisa. Mahal natin ang Pilipinas. May God bless the Philippines. Daghang salamat.
Bok, the canvassing of votes for President and Vice President lasted for only 2 days, making this the fastest canvassing in Philippine election history. Despite this, the Congress said and assured the public that the rules were followed and that the accuracy and transparency, they did not sacrifice this as well. Bok.
Well, Marian, yesterday, the first day of the canvassing, there were still questions about COCs that were not put inside the ballot boxes. I suppose these have already been resolved as of today.
Yes, Bog, all the COCs that were missing were already sent here and personally delivered by the Provincial Board of Electors and the COMELEC officers here at the Batasan in the plenary. Bog.
Okay, maraming salamat, Marian Enriquez, reporting live from the Batasang Pambansa. The only son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr., Bongbong or Bonget as he is called by those really close to him, manifested at a young age that he wanted to be a politician. While that was an achievable feat for somebody belonging to a political clan, his loftiest goal to be president like his father did not come easy. A look back at his journey in Marty Bautista's report.
Bongbong finally appeared. The most adorable, giggly, chubby baby you can imagine.
It was September 13, 1957 when Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was born, the second child and only son of then-late Congressman Ferdinand Marcos and beauty queen Imelda Romualdez.
I am Bongbong Marcos. When I grow up, I want to be a politician.
When he was 8 years old, Marcos Jr. acted as himself in a movie called Iginuhit ng Tadhana, a biopic of his father for the 1965 presidential elections. True to his words, he grew up and entered the world of politics at 23. In 1980, the younger Marcos was elected as vice governor of Ilocos Norte, then governor 3 years later. Known as Bunget to those close to him, Marcos Jr. is reported to be chill, easygoing, and loves music. In the last few hours of the Marcoses in Malacanang, he was seen wearing a military fatigue. Trained as a scout ranger, Marcos Jr. wanted to face the soldiers who were planning a coup d'etat against his father. After Marcos Sr.'s 21-year dictatorial rule, the family fled overseas in exile, and this is how the younger Marcos met his now wife, Lisa Araneta. Their relationship had a rocky start, as the Arenetas are against the Marcoses, but the pair still got married. In 1991, Marcos Jr. went back to the Philippines, making a controversial appearance in Chris Aquino's program.
Sa akin, sabi ko, bakit hindi? Sa wakas.
Oo naman, at magkumparet-kumare tayo.
It wasn't long after his return that he entered politics again, first as a governor of Ilocos, then second as congressman. He won as senator in 2010, the same time late martyr Senator Benigno Aquino and late former President Cory Aquino's only son, Ninoy Aquino, was elected as president. This was the Marcoses' first comeback in national politics. In 2016, he ran as vice president, but lost to incumbent Vice President Leni Robredo. They both had a rematch in this year's elections, but this time for the top seat, where Marcos Jr. won by a large margin, making him poised to be the Republic's 17th president. For News 5, Marty Bautista, We Are One News.
These are the other big stories tonight. Lawyer and vlogger Trixie Cruz Angeles has been named Presidential Communications Secretary of the Marcos administration, but no, she will not be presidential spokesperson. Meanwhile, the incumbent Budget Committee has set a record 5.27 trillion peso budget for the Marcos administration in its first full year. But that comes with the need for additional taxes. And the boy on the banknote, the story of how the little boy in the 500 peso bill met with Vice President Leni Robredo. These big stories after the break. watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao. President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s cabinet continues to take shape. This time, he's tapping lawyer-vlogger Trixie Angeles Cruz as the next PCOO chief. Camille Samonte with the story.
From being a social media strategist and vlogger to being the press secretary of the next administration, lawyer and radio commentator Trixie Angeles Cruz has officially accepted President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s offer to be the next chief of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. As the incoming press secretary, Attorney Angeles Cruz will be in charge of PTV4 and other state-owned media channels. She will also be handling the coverage of presidential events. But Attorney Trixie will not be the next presidential spokesperson. Outgoing PCOO head Martin Andanar himself says he wants Attorney Trixie to take over. She is not new to the PCOO department as she served the office in the early years of the Duterte administration. But other than that, Angeles is known as the lawyer of former Customs Chief's ex-Martin Captain Nicanor Faeldon. She was also a part of ex-Chief Justice Renato Corona's legal team during his impeachment trial in 2012. She also defended some expelled members of the Iglesia ni Cristo. She was also a former spokesperson of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. But in 2016, the Supreme Court slapped her with a 3-year suspension over a complaint in 2003. Her suspension had ended in 2019. Also a pro-Duterte vlogger, Attorney Trixie Angeles Cruz has now garnered over 7.6 million views on her YouTube channel and has gained over 400,000 followers on Facebook. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
With lawyer and vlogger Trixie Cruz Angeles set to become the new head of the PCOO, how will the transition be like? That big question and more with PCOO Undersecretary Chris Ablan. Yusek Ablan, thank you for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Thank you very much for having me, Ed.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I said the Chiefs. It's the Big Story pala. Wrong program. But anyway, sir, let's talk about transition. I suppose that there's already been some communication between Attorney Trixie and PCOO for the transition team or for the turnover of the work.
Yeah, we have spoken to her transition team already, and we've already initiated the transition transfer. And we're hoping to schedule a formal meeting with the incoming PCO secretary so that we can do a proper turnover together with incumbent PCO secretary Martin Andanar.
Yes, sir. Has there already been word as to what she plans to do, or if she has any programs that she wants to institute or implement in the next 6 years?
None as of the moment. We are very excited to hear her policy direction for the next 6 years under a Marcos administration.
Yes, sir. But in the meantime, from your perspective, what are the pending what are the pending pieces of work that need to be, from your perspective, continued or worked on going to the next administration?
Secretary Martin Andanar would leave a legacy of expanding the coverage of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. For last 2 years, we inaugurated the Mindanao Media Hub, and right now we are trying to build a Visayas Media Hub in Cebu. That is something that we are expecting that the incoming secretary will support. Secretary Andanar also envisioned a training facility for information officers of local government units. And we're building the Government Communications Academy in Manolo Fortich, Bukidnon. And it's actually being built right now, Ed. And hopefully by the end of this year, it will be operational. So that is something that we hope the incoming secretary will support as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. A training facility in Bukidnon. Actually, that's an exciting idea. But sir, let me just go back a bit. I do remember in 2016, Secretary Martin was talking about hopefully turning the government station into something like a BBC or a PBS, a public broadcasting network instead of a government broadcasting network. I'm wondering if it has moved forward in any way, because I think that also needs legislation.
That is correct. Unfortunately, the People's Broadcasting Corporation bill is still with on the committee level at the House. And so we are hoping that the incoming secretary will also support this measure. as we intend to file it again in the coming Congress. Aside from that, Ed, other pieces of legislation that we hope the incoming Secretary will support would be the passage of the very delayed Freedom of Information Bill. We do have a current bill right now called the Media Workers Welfare Act, already passed by the House of Representatives last year, pending with the Senate, and we're very hopeful that in the final days of this Congress, it will be passed. If it won't be passed, then that's another piece of legislation that we hope incoming Secretary Cruz Angeles will also support.
Okay, we'd like to wish you luck for those pending bills. Maraming salamat po, PCOO Undersecretary Chris Sablan. Thank you for joining us. For almost 3 weeks now, the Marcos camp's headquarters in Mandaluyong has been filled with supporters. But what exactly are they hoping for as they wait day in and day out? Mobile journalist Julie Baiza with their story.
In the middle of bustling EDSA, groups in red and green continue to flock to the Marcos headquarters in Mandaluyong. Never mind the heat and hunger, supporters have been longing to get a glimpse of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Their fervor never wavered, ever since unofficial results showed their bet as the clear winner. Such is the case for Lolo Inigo, who traveled miles from Quezon. He was a former government employee under late dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. He hopes to get in touch with his former boss's son to get help.
Magkatrabaho yung aking mga anak, magkatrabaho ako kung pwede pa para makasuporta ko sa aking maintenance.
Lola Melita says she also came to ask for help to reopen her own school, which closed due to the pandemic. Melly, on the other hand, claims she heard that Marcos Jr. will be giving out money.
Nadinig ko na namimiga daw si BBM dito ng tulong na 10,000, sir. Ay ganito naman, wala pa pala.
But some supporters are more than happy to just show support, like Oscar, who apart from bringing his pictures with the Marcos family, carried with him a cassette tape which contains what he believes to be Marcos Jr.'s favorite songs.
At puro Beatles ang parang nasanay siya sa mga kantang mga Beatles eh.
Their reasons may vary from wanting to have even a glimpse of Marcos Jr., but they have a single hope: a better life in the next 6 years, a hope they hope will be realized under the new administration. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza, We Are One News.
Time for another quick break. More of these big stories when we return. watching The Big Story. I'm Edwin Gao. In spite of possibly enjoying a bigger budget in 2023, the Marcos administration might just have to do an overhaul of the tax system to pay for COVID-19 debts. Shaila Francisco with the story.
The incoming administration of President-elect Bongbong Marcos may get as much as 5.27 trillion peso budget for 2023. The Development Budget Coordinating Committee approved the higher budget amid an increase in revenue collections. The Budget Department noted that the approved amount is set, but they can still tweak within the budget.
It may be tight, but we have to live within that level if we want to be respected in the international financial community.
The Marcos Jr. administration may also welcome 2023 with more taxes. This as the government needs to start paying debt incurred during the pandemic.
The next administration must find ways to shore up revenues to sustain yung stimulus program, no? Yung Executive Order 166 na yan. Okay, and pay off debts. Pagka hindi natin to seryosohin, okay? Lalo tayong mahihirapan na humiram, no?
The Finance Department, for its part, has already come up with a fiscal consolidation plan for the next administration. It includes the postponement of income tax reduction from next year until 2025. The agency also wants to remove VAT exemptions to expand the base and impose taxes on motorcycles, gaming, and others. Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez said that deviating from these recommendations could have serious implications on the Philippine economy. Some economists agree, although noting that the proposals are painful reforms.
Yung mga kaya namang sumalo nun ang magbabayad nun. Huwag mong pasaluhin yan sa mga hikahus na nga eh. 'Di ba? Pagkain, tumaas pa yan lalo. Transportasyon. Yung benefits na ma-generate nito will outweigh the costs.
For now, the National Economic and Development Authority will focus on further reopening the economy. Former NEDA Chief Arsenio Balisacan is set to return as head of the Socio-Economic Planning Agency under the Marcos administration. Shaila Francisco, we are One News.
Would you call it fate? The boy who appeared in one of the photos printed at the back of the old 500 peso bill recently met with VP Leni Robredo in New York. Last May 21, Nurse Angelo Gutierrez chanced upon Robredo at Central Park, where she and her daughters went for a stroll days after daughter Jillian Robredo's graduation from New York University. After sharing their photo online, a former teacher of Gutierrez shared that Angelo was indeed the boy on the old 500 peso bill. The photo was based on a real event where young Angelo gave flowers to a soldier during the People Power Revolution. While the said 500 peso banknote is no longer in circulation, it's a moment that Angelo will remember for the rest of his life. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channel 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News, for more in-depth analysis. Visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. On behalf of Robbie Lampay and Gretchen Ho, I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News.